Hi there, my name is Ewan Nicholson. Welcome to my YouTube channel Remembering Love. The title of today's video is How Do We Reduce the Volume of the Inner Critic? And today we're going to be doing part 2. In the last video we did part 1, which was what is the inner critic, why do we have one, and why is it something worth looking at? And today in part 2 we're going to be answering the question of how do we make that distinction between the voice of our inner critic and the voice of our conscience, and why that can be a little bit tricky, and how do we kind of pass them apart and say here's one and here's the other. I'm also going to be introducing you to a special guest, which is the voice of my inner critic, which I'm sure you'll be fascinated to hear what goes on inside my mind, so stay tuned for that. So let's get started. How do we make that distinction between the voice of the inner critic and the voice of our conscience? And the reason this is a kind of a tricky thing to kind of do and understand is if it was only as simple as, look, there's the voice of my inner critic. Beep, I'll shut that down, or I'll just turn the volume down. Oh, there's the voice of my conscience. Better, turn that up as long as it's not saying something too mean, etc., etc., etc. But the nature of the stream of our consciousness is all these things are kind of intermixed and weaving and ducking and enmeshed together. And a good analogy is to really think about a bucket of white paint. And as you stir in some black paint, to begin with, you can see the kind of the black paint in streams, and you can kind of make some separation between the black paint and the white paint. But as you mix and mix, little by little, the ability to distinguish the white from the black gets harder and harder, to the end where it all becomes grey. And once it's grey, it becomes impossible to separate, well, this is where the white is and this is where the black is. And that is very much like our stream of consciousness, but add another 20, 30, 40 colours in that mix, and you get a sense of how it feels experientially in terms of the way we think and feel. So what will happen is when we hit circumstances where we feel like maybe we've done something wrong, maybe we've acted in bad faith, and it triggers the voice of our inner critic, but it also triggers the voice of our conscience. And how do we separate the white and the black paint at that point? And how do we listen and attend to the voice of our conscience? Because it's important, it's necessary. And how do we sort of not push aside, but learn to disconnect or turn down the volume of our inner critic? Because the voice of our conscience is critical. It's important. It's not a voice we want to switch off in the process of switching off our inner critic. Because all of us throughout our life will do things that we just shouldn't do, in the sense that we act selfishly, we act vengefully, we do hurtful things, we act from pride, greed, and our actions have consequences, and they do hurt people or upset people, or they set us back, or they set other people back. And when those moments come, we need to have the humility and self-awareness to say, yeah, I shouldn't have done that, and I need to address that, and I need to take responsibility for my actions, and that is the function of our conscience. And so it's a voice we do need to pay attention to, and we do need to listen to, but we don't want to mix it up with the inner critic, because in a weird kind of way, which I'll come to in a second, is the inner critic has a way of shutting the conscience down and kind of overriding it. So we get the voice of this inner critic, but in the meantime we haven't really taken responsibility for the very thing that maybe we should. But let me introduce you to someone who's played a really pivotal role in my life and occupies my mind on a regular basis, and it's the voice of my own inner critic. And I want to give you a bird's eye view on the way he thinks and what he says and how he presents himself, in my mind at least, and maybe you'll have something similar. So I'm just going to do this, wave this kind of magical video magic, and we'll bring up the voice of my inner critic. Hi inner critic, we're just talking about you.
So, you talking about me? That doesn't surprise me. I know you love to hear the sound of your own voice. Have you thought about that, Ewan? How much you love to hear yourself speak?
Well, I am doing a YouTube video, so it's kind of necessary. There's no need to be so mean.
I'm not being mean. I'm being honest. I think you are a little bit egocentric, wouldn't you agree?
Well, everyone's egocentric. But look, I'm doing a video for the YouTube, so please, give me a break.
It's YouTube, not the YouTubes. You are quite stupid at times, you know that.
I know, you keep reminding me. I mean, you're so mean. Have you ever thought about maybe you need a hug?
Excuse me, I don't need a hug, I think you need a slap. You're very thin-skinned. You can't take a little bit of honest criticism, a little honest feedback. I'm not your inner critic, I'm just your honest appraiser. And you just can't handle a little bit of truth.
It's not truth. You're just constantly insulting me all the time. Come on.
I don't insult you. Truth is, you are a pathetic loser. You just need to deal with that.
And there you go. There is my inner critic revealing himself on YouTube. And what you'll find is that's a pretty accurate representation of the tone of that inner critic, for me at least, that doesn't present itself as an inner critic. It presents itself as being honest. Look, you are lazy. You are fat. You are selfish. That's just the truth. I'm just keeping it real. You just got to accept that. I'm trying to help you actually motivate yourself, move forward, but you can't do that until you accept the truth that you're this gross, lazy, fat pig, basically. So there it is. At the same time, my conscience is also presenting itself as a voice of truth. But come on, Ewan, you've behaved poorly here. Come on, Ewan, you've been selfish here. You need to apologize. So here you have these two very similar voices, both presenting themselves as the voice of truth, the voice of just keeping it real and being honest, yet one is my conscience and one is my inner critic. And how do I tell the difference? So let me take you through how I've learned little by little to make that kind of separation, as difficult as it is, and I don't always kind of get it right. And it's really down to kind of two things. It's this sense of responsibility and this sense of looking for solutions. Because what you'll find is with the inner critic is it's not really solution orientated or responsibility orientated or making amends orientated. I don't know if you remember back in the day where there were these prank calls you could make based on pre-recordings where they'd ring some poor old granny up, and what she wasn't aware of is the call was pre-recorded and there was enough pauses and gaps in it to make her think that it was a real person, yet it was just a robot or it was just a pre-recording, and everyone would laugh, ha ha ha, because she thinks it's real. And the inner critic is a little bit like that it's a pre-recorded conversation, it's a pre-recorded dialogue, and it's very limited in how far you can go with it. So if you ask your inner critic, well, what should I do about it? Well, there's nothing to do about it. You're this, or do more, or you'll just throw out another criticism. That there's no real humility, there's no real responsibility. It's just more of the same over and over and over. And the voice of our conscience is looking for solutions. It's looking to fix things. It's looking to repair things. It's looking not to repeat that pattern of behavior. And that is what really makes the difference. So let me give you a concrete example. Imagine we're at Easter and me and my wife get 6 eggs from her sister, 6 Easter eggs, delicious eggs, kind of milk chocolate with white chocolate with these little Smarties in them. And on Easter Day, I eat all of my 6 eggs, and they're in this little plastic container like real eggs. And my wife says, well, I'm going to have them another day, and she puts them in the fridge. Okay, we get to October, they're still in the fridge, all 6 of them. She's not eaten one of them. She goes away one weekend and I think, you know what, she's never going to eat those eggs. They're probably going to go off. It's late at night, there's no chocolate in the house, I'm really hungry and I'm really desperate for some chocolate. And I think, you know what, I'm going to eat those eggs. I mean, she won't even know. They're at the back of the fridge, they've been there for X amount of months, and so I eat them. I eat all of them because once I eat one, then it kind of opens up Cookie Monster. Next thing I've eaten all 6 of them. And then she comes home and has this intuition, this awareness that I want to eat my eggs now, and obviously I've eaten them. She gets angry, not I'm going to divorce you angry, but she's irritated and annoyed that they're her eggs, you ate yours, I want to eat mine, and you've selfishly taken them, and you can't go replace them because there's no Easter eggs in the shops in October. So what happens at that moment? I'm busted in inverted commas, and this is obviously just a hypothetical. I'm busted, and there are 2 voices at that point. There's the voice of you're such a greedy pig, and then there's a voice of that was selfish and you shouldn't have done that. And they both are being honest on one level to a certain degree, but the distinction is tone. So first of all, the voice of the inner critic it's not really looking for a solution. It's not looking to make amends. It's not looking to take responsibility. It's just looking for an opportunity to insult me and to prove that I am all these kind of terrible things. Where the voice of my conscience is really saying, you shouldn't have done that. What are you going to do to fix it? What are you going to do to ensure you don't do that again? How do you make amends? How do you take responsibility? And that is really the distinction and the difference between the two. One is looking for a solution and one is looking for an excuse to insult you. And the truth is, if I get lost in my inner critic rather than my conscience, what I'm then doing is turning that issue of what I've done by eating the chocolate eggs into all about me. Like, I feel so bad, I'm so terrible, and I'm so greedy, and you can't trust me, you should lock the fridge when you're gone. And next thing you know, her pain of losing her eggs is now about my pain of how bad I feel about myself. So it's also very self-absorbed and very selfish to then go into that, because I've now turned it all about me. And that's where if we shut the voice of our conscience down and let that inner critic come up, it makes us very self-absorbed and ironically selfish. And I'm using a sort of a benign or an inconsequential example. But there are plenty of things we do throughout our lives that really do hurt people, whether we betray someone, whether we gossip about someone, whether we steal. There's all sorts of things in our lifetime most of us will commit that we just shouldn't have, or we've acted in bad faith, and we should be humble and we should have a conscience. Because not to have a conscience is really what defines a sociopath or a malignant narcissist, someone who acts without impunity or without caring. So the voice of our conscience is necessary. Yeah, and we all do things that, in retrospect we probably shouldn't have done, and we've acted from a difficult place. We need to be able to listen to that voice without the inner critic overriding it. And the volume of the inner critic taking over and turning something that we should be making amends for, taking responsibility, working for solutions to fix, to turn into a giant opportunity to put myself down. And that is how you tell the difference. Where is the solution? Where is the responsibility? And how far can this internal conversation go? If you're talking to your inner critic, you'll always find it runs out of things to say. It just comes back to the same point, the same message. It is a pre-recording that we just repeat over and over. Our conscience isn't. There's an awareness in our conscience, a sentience that is looking for solutions. It's not looking to feel bad about ourselves. It's looking to grow and change and evolve. And that is the difference. So look, I hope this has made sense. If you have had an experience of the difference between your inner critic and your conscience, please share it in the comments below. I'd love to hear some feedback. If you've enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. In the next video, part 3, we're going to be looking at the question of why positive affirmations are not enough when it comes to dealing with the inner critic, so stay tuned for that. And the 4th and final video, we're going to be looking at 5 practical steps that you can employ that will reduce the volume of the inner critic, I would consider dramatically. So look, take care of yourself. Thanks for tuning in, and bye-bye.